What's going on, FTN Tribe? This is your host, Mike Wojcik. Welcome back to episode 14. Today's guest is Dr. Chris Walker of Walker Chiropractic here in Augusta, Georgia. For those of you who don't know, I have scoliosis, and so the notion of being able to sit down and talk to a medical professional who specializes in the spine has always been interesting to me. And chiropractor or chiropractic medicine seems to be really picking up in popularity in the last decade or so. So without further ado, let's get cracking. All right, now we are rolling. Dr. Chris Walker, thank you for coming, man. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Why don't you take a second and introduce yourself and tell the listeners what it is you do and who you are, what you love, so on and so forth.
I am Dr. Chris Walker. I am a chiropractor in Augusta, Georgia. I've been practicing now, September was 17 years. I've been in Augusta for 15. We've been in the location we are now for the last, will be 13 in January.
Yeah, and you guys got a prime location over on Washington Road.
Yeah, we do. We were really lucky. We were blessed with that location. Dr. Kim Lombardi actually practiced there for 28 years. Mm-hmm. And then he had closed that practice because he was going to be working with MCG. And it was actually, he was closed for like 6 months. And when God decided that we were supposed to be here in Augusta permanently, mm-hmm. Me and my wife, because we had met separately, we had both moved here for different reasons. The minute we had decided we were going to stay in Augusta, we found that building like 4 days later.
Wow.
We were open 6 weeks later. Yeah.
Pretty quick turnaround, right?
It was.
Yeah. Where did you and your wife meet beforehand? Like, how did you guys end up in Augusta?
Well, my wife actually worked, she helped build the natural gas pipeline.
Oh, wow.
So she was support for the land acquisitions from Savannah all the way up to Anderson, South Carolina. And I met her at a wine tasting at the first week like Earth Fair was open. And, yeah, she walked up to me first thing. And, yeah.
Wow.
And we've been together ever since.
That's incredible. Are you a big wine guy?
I definitely enjoy a nice glass of red wine.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, maybe 3-4 episodes ago, I had a sommelier on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys know things. No, I just know if it tastes good or tastes bad.
Oh, it's incredible. That was my longest podcast by far. It was a 2-hour podcast. We did a tasting along with the show, and it was, I mean, he would say things like, oh, you just smell the lavender and taste this, and you're like, how do you even get to that, you know? It's so funny. Impressive, just the palate that these guys have. All right, so I'll bring it back. You guys moved to Augusta. You found the practice. I guess let's take it really back to the beginning. What is chiropractic care, and what made you get into it?
Well, I started as a nurse.
Yeah.
So I actually started nursing school in my senior year of high school.
Right.
They had a bridge program. So I actually started as a CNA, and then got my LPN. Mm-hmm. And then I did specialty adolescent nursing care. And it was because really a lot of it I just fell into it because of my age. I was, 18, 9 years old, and I could relate with the 12, 14-year-old kid that was a paraplegic. And
right.
Life kind of, not so great, but hey, I could relate to him on a level what he was kind of going through. And I was actually going to be a physical therapist. I'd got into Stony Brook University, which has got a phenomenal program, and my sister got hit by a street sweeper. And she went to all these different doctors, and nothing seemed to work. And she, one night I came home from working one late when I was working like a 3 to 11, and my sister was like sleeping quietly, and I was like, she's not hurting. And next day at breakfast, I said, hey, you feeling better? Like usually you were like up, you were like sound asleep. And she was like, yeah, I went to this doctor. I'm like, what doctor? She goes, I went to a chiropractor. And she goes, well, I was like, what did they do? And she goes, I really don't know. She goes, but I feel like a whole lot better. And within a few weeks, she was doing just tremendous.
Really?
So I ended up actually working in that chiropractic office to get my PT hours. I was volunteering, And I got really good close with the younger chiropractor there who was out for about a year or two, Mike Gallagher. And we went out to have a couple of drinks one night, just chewing the fat. And he told me, he says, I really think you're wasting you should, this is the path for you. And of course I laughed at him and, said, okay, here, go let me buy you a beer.
Yeah.
And the next day I walked in and him and Dr. Mark, who was Mark's student, it was the owner of the practice. They had contacted every chiropractic school in the country and had already asked for applications and information. And they had a stack that was probably like 2 feet high and said, we think you should go to Life University. That's where we went. And we think it's the best school. And that's it. This is what we think you should do. And I went home, thought they were crazy. Literally had a conversation with my parents over Sunday dinner of like, hey, like they brought this up to me and my mom and dad were like, well, what do you think? And I was like, it is pretty cool what they do to watch that they're healing without drugs, without needles, surgery, anything else. And I mean, look what they did, Victoria. And I think it was like a month later, me and my mom were in Atlanta, walking around Life University and getting a tour. And while I was on campus, I just had that little voice inside that said, this is where you're supposed to be. Yeah. And 3 months later, on my 24th birthday, I moved to Atlanta. That's what I drove. I drove down on my birthday because I had to be in classes by the Labor Day. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
I didn't. So Life University's in Atlanta?
It is. It's in Marietta.
Is it only how does that work? I get that's one of the questions I have actually is like what does schooling look like for chiropractors?
It's basically the same schooling as if you're going to become a medical doctor. You really need a 4-year degree, and then you have 4 years of chiropractic school. The big difference is between chiropractors and medical doctors, regular GPs, is then they tend to do a residency afterwards, right? Right. Well, our last 2 years, we do our residency while we're doing our regular class hours.
I see.
So where they maybe go, they're not taking classes, then they're doing residency. No, we're doing, unfortunately, sometimes I think the setup might be better if it's because of the juggling of hours. Because basically you're going to school full time and it's a quarter system, at least where I went was a quarter system. So you're taking 20 hours of credits each quarter. And then, you got clinic, which can take you, quickly as you want to get through it and how much you want to work it. And, some people drag it out. I treated it as best as I could, like it was my own office. Yeah. And wanted to get done as quickly as possible.
So as far as the schooling, how far into it before you actually get your hands on an individual and are making adjustments?
Well, you first got to learn why and how.
Probably pretty important there.
Usually it's more about, chiropractic's what our job, number one job is to find and correct and detect and correct subluxations. And what that means in a nutshell, to keep it simple, is that the bones sometimes move out of place and then they put pressure directly or indirectly on a nerve root, breaking the brain-body connection and causing things to either gets overstimulated or understimulated.
I see.
And our job is to remove that interference and allow the body to talk the way it was designed to. So a lot of it at the beginning is learning how to feel muscle spasms, feel edema,
really?
What they call motion, but yeah.
Is it weird? Is it like a fine-tuned thing where you have to know, all right, this is a muscle spasm and all that?
Well, yeah. I mean, you got to get really good with your fingers. I remember sitting around and I'm involved with a chiropractic professional fraternity. Most people would be out on the bar on Friday nights. We would be sitting around, having a couple of beers, but we'd have a big old-fashioned, the things that used to be phone books. Those big yellow.
Yeah, I know phone books.
So the big Atlanta phone books were really, really, really big. And we would take pieces start with yarn, and then eventually we would go down to threads. And we would have competitions of who could feel it where by how thick. So in other words, someone else would place it in the book. Yeah. And you would have to find it on that page And, you know, it's how far through the book can you still feel that small little change?
That's impressive.
Training our fingers and our minds so we could do different things.
That's impressive. So the whole point of it was to get as many pages thick as possible and still feel.
Yep.
That's pretty impressive. Man, how many names did you get through, you think?
What do you mean?
What do you think is like the thickest stack you got through?
The thickest stack I got was probably about 8 inches.
That's
like
insane.
That. Probably 6 inches.
That's
6
insane.
inches realistically. It's like the fish story, you know, gets bigger as
as
you get older, the thing gets bigger.
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. So you graduate from Life University. You're a chiropractor now. Is that when you moved to Augusta at that point?
No, I actually practiced in Michigan. For a year.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like most people, I met somebody when I was going to school, and we thought we were going to go up there and practice. And she was a few years behind me. Things didn't work out, but I got to work with Tom Moses. Was a phenomenal. I hated Detroit, but I loved my experience in there.
Yeah.
Because working in with Tom, he was practicing probably at that time, probably 35 years. He owned 3 clinics. Also was a great businessman outside, had multiple businesses outside of the clinics. And he just called me up and said, "Hey, I think you should come work with me, whether you want to be in Michigan or not. I know I can teach you a lot." I had known Tom for a while. He was a fraternity brother. His daughter was a couple years behind me. So he was always in town coming to visit, and we would talk. And he said, I will teach you what they don't teach you in school.
Yeah.
And it was great. Unfortunately for Tom got sick. And I went from being the junior associate to Tom saying, "I need you to be me because I trust you." And basically went from being the junior associate to the senior clinic, overseeing over all the other docs. And it was really great experience because it just threw me into the flames and saying, "Hey, you got to figure this stuff out."
Yeah, I'm a big believer in sometimes the best lessons you can learn is just being fed to the wolves and learning to deal with it yourself.
And being in such and I practiced in so many different. So we had clinics in 3 different areas of Detroit, and each area was completely different. Economically, nationality, the demographics were just completely different. So I got to.
That's really cool.
It was really, really cool.
Yeah, there's something unique that happens to individuals when they're exposed to, I guess, extreme diversity like that.
Yeah, and I loved it.
It really opens your mind to, what's out there, and everybody's pretty much going through the same things.
Yeah,
So
it was a really, really cool experience, and Tom really asked me to stay, and it just wasn't for me.
Yeah,
I just knew I wasn't going to be there for the rest of my life. I could have made a lot of money. I mean, Tom made it for somebody being out at that point, 11 months of what he was offering me. Most of my buddies would have said, "Sign me up."
Right.
But I just knew I wouldn't be emotionally happy.
Yeah.
So I came back down to Atlanta, and I ran a clinic in Atlanta. Trying to figure out, like, I just needed a place to practice. I didn't know if I wanted to be there long term, where I want to put the roots down. After I was in Atlanta for a year, I realized that I loved Atlanta for, at least back then, 17 years ago. Yeah. I loved it for school, but I didn't think I wanted to practice in such a big city. Even though I grew up in New York, I grew up on Long Island.
Yeah, the real New York, I guess.
Yeah,
I'm from upstate, so I gotta represent upstate.
So,
but
New York, Long Island, where I grew up, is even though it's got a lot of people there, and it's doubled since I've left, but it still has that small town feel. And that's what I want.
The 5 boroughs and all that. It's all.
Well, Long Island is just even further out.
Yeah.
And when I joined a practice here in Augusta. I actually came to Augusta for and I did a little patchwork, cover work to kind of first see if it was a good fit.
Yeah. And
just driving around the town, I was like, oh no, this has got a little city, it's got a little country, it's got a little suburb, it's got a really nice balance.
Yeah.
And I saw the potential of what Augusta is turning into in the CSRA area. And I still didn't know if I was going to be 100% where I was going to be, but I felt that's where I was led. And I guess I was, because that's, a couple years later, fast forward, I met my best friend and my wife. So
that's awesome. That's awesome. I don't mean to take this into like a bad thing, but I want to talk about some of the misconceptions and stigmas that surround chiropractic care, because like we said kind of off air beforehand, I feel like it started off as, maybe fringe isn't the right word, but it's just something that wasn't commonly used per se. And maybe you can attest to that when you were growing up. Were there any stigmas then of chiropractors?
I really just didn't know.
Yeah.
So I can't really say to honestly that there was a friend. I mean, I remember when I first talked to my sister, my mom looking at me going, "Hey, we brought you to a chiropractor when you hurt your back when you were like 12. You don't remember?" And I was like, "Did you?" And I was like, "Wait." I was like, "Oh yeah." And this guy like just kind of mashed on my back. She's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Huh, why we stopped going?" And she got my mom going, "I don't know." And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
She goes, "But it was really great. You did so much better." I was like, "Okay." She was like, "Remember when you fell down the flight of stairs at school?" And I was like, it's funny. I forget a lot of that negative stuff. My body's got a way of, like, I think everybody does at some point, bad stuff that happens, especially when it's like high school years, middle school years. You just kind of
get rid of it.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you think, I guess, started those stigmas? Like, where did the stigmas come from?
Well, I think stigmas in general, when you're talking about stuff like that, everybody's afraid of new stuff. And, my profession in itself can sometimes be its own worst enemy. Because there's just different ways of doing things.
When you say its own worst enemy, you're talking like chiropractors not making a good name for the practice of.
Yeah. I mean, to me, chiropractic is a very, very simple thing. It's not very complicated. Like we kind of talked about earlier, your body was designed to look a certain way. And so it can function a certain way. Because structure dictates function.
Right.
And if structure is off, well, then bad things can happen. And our job is very, very simple, is to make sure that the brain and body's connection is working the way it's supposed to.
Right.
And make sure that that structure is as fundamentally sound as it can be, so it doesn't continue to degenerate. That make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think is making or allowing the field of chiropractic care to kind of make its way to the main stage now? I feel like that, I guess, it's happening maybe because I'm newly like getting into this whole thing, but I feel like it's now starting to really, like, the rubber's hitting the road.
Well, I think in general in healthcare, all around, I think people for a very long time thought everything was a magic pill, potion, or lotion would fix everything.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think people are realizing that a lot of that stuff just covered up things.
Oh, absolutely.
I think I'm not an anti-medicine guy at all. I think there's a time and place. I think all the opioid epidemic, really, when it come to chiropractic, I think that was one of the things that sparked people of saying there's got to be a better way than just getting people for low back pain and neck pain or whatever it was, that we got to start looking for alternatives. And of course, we're all standing here going on the sideline going, "Hey, we've been talking about this for years."
Yeah.
All that stuff does is cover things up. It doesn't actually fix anything.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that, and frankly, why I started to look into, I guess, alternative methods is I hated the fact that a doctor sees you for maybe 5 to 10 minutes if you're lucky, and that's your exchange. And all they do at the end of the day is, here's a script, use this. Hopefully this makes it feel better. It doesn't actually, like, they don't chase the root cause of something and fix it at the root. So that's kind of what got me started into this whole thing. So yeah, I think that I really, and frankly, that's also why I look to diet as something that's making its way to the main stage now, is, people eating a different way because, the things that doctors are taught is just becoming not true, if that makes sense.
Yes. I think people are just looking that there's got to be a better way than just saying, hey, take this pill for the rest of your life, and that's it.
Yeah.
You know, that there's alternatives to, I had a little bit of high blood pressure. You know, I like my personal physician. He said, hey, you got bad genetics. And he's like, he's like, you know what, before we do this, let's do A, B, and C. And I did half of A, B, and C, to be honest with you. I got to get back on that track because he doesn't want me to be on a pill for the rest of my life. Because if I decide to make some life choices that are better, I won't have to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think people are just, in general, getting tired of that. And I really think it's the opioid epidemic that started a lot of that. People just the wake-up call of going, what else are we just covering up or just throwing stuff at?
Yeah.
And then also you have some of those drugs got approved that probably shouldn't have got approved, and you had a bunch of them that said that they thought were safe, and 12 years later they're like, oh no, it's not safe. And I think those people weren't doing anything wrong. They thought they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
But people were like, okay, well, before I go down that road, I don't want to be one of those people. I'm going to try something else.
Yeah. Sounds, well,
and if
not to get political, but it sounds a little similar to what's happening now, right?
Yeah.
Not good or bad. I'm just saying.
Yes.
It sounds
to me, if we talk about that kind of stuff, everybody has a right to choose.
Yeah.
And I don't care if somebody wants to get the shot, don't get the shot. That to me, that is personal.
Oh, absolutely.
Up to you.
Yeah. All right. So it's actually, you said earlier, common, like the low back pain and all that. I think I read a stat that said like 73% of people will experience low or back pain in their life.
Yep.
Does that sound true to you?
Yeah, most definitely.
That's crazy. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, typically when we see people come into the office, most of the things that we see as adults started when people were kids. Mm-hmm. Small problem happens. So how God designed the body's going to adapt, right?
Right.
So it'll shift things forward. So I'm going to try to best visualize this over with words.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because usually we have this conversation with, images and pictures with people. So if you're looking at somebody's spine from the front to the back, and you'll see these little bright whites on an x-ray, that's the spinous processes. You're supposed to be straight as an arrow. When you look at the spine from the side, well, you should have 3 curves. Okay, you should have a curve in your neck.
Cervical.
Yep. You should have a lordotic curve in your cervical, so it means you should look like a reverse C up there. And your mid-back, you should have a C that's been stretched out a little bit. It's a little more extended, not as pronounced as the neck. And then in the low back, you have another reverse C curve. So you kind of look like a spring.
Right.
Well, you could, in that position, you can hold 15 times more pressure and weight compared if you were just stacked one on top of the other. So there's a reason why he did this. And they've done studies and compression studies with even like cement blocks, putting them in that formation and it's 15 times more. So there's a reason why I designed this that way. So if things shift just a little bit, doesn't seem like a big deal. But your body now will, over time, shift a little bit more to compensate. Mm-hmm. And then your body will shift a little bit more. That's why we see so many people losing their curve in their neck. And then you got those macro tremors and micro tremors. It's little events and big events that happen in our lives. So like the average child, falls learning how to walk about 1,500 times.
That seems a lot.
That's a lot, right?
Yeah.
You don't think they knocked anything out of place?
Yeah.
Then you have, falling off a swing. You played sports. Oh, you know what? You looked under the bed for that pair of shoes and hit your head. Yeah. If you fell off the monkey bars. Got into a car accident when you got older. And all those events go into your body, and physics says force follows the path of least resistance, right? So that force is always, when it goes into your body, is always going to the weakest area. So that area, every time you have some kind of traumatic, small little event force going in, is going to go to the area that's least unstable and kind of mess it up. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you did a really good job of that. The interesting thing to me when we're going through that, the neck, the loss of the curvature in the neck, does that have something to do, in your opinion, with technology?
It is definitely increased. So if I go back, just like looking at old films, so as I've been in the location that we are in now, we've been in on 13 years. And we were one of the first people to go digital. So I've got digital now for 8 years of it. So I can go back and look at people's x-rays and see what the normal reduced curve was. Yeah, it's definitely, you know, we kind of refer to it jokingly, or as the commonly term is called text neck.
Text neck.
Is the, you know, I guess, you know, the
unofficial
buzzword, the buzzword for it, you know, the buzzword for it is text neck. And it is definitely a thing. You know, the average person coming in probably was maybe an inch to an inch and a half. You know, 12, 13 years ago. Now we're looking at 2.5, 3 inches is not so off the charts. Man. And which means then we're seeing them out with their head reverse curve. They're holding their head out like a chicken, which now is throwing everything else off, which is putting more pressure on the thoracics and lumbars. You know, one way of looking at how a spinal degeneration happens, and I use this a lot when we're talking in the office, just because I like to keep things simple.
Right.
I think a lot of times with medicine and doctors in general, we complicate things. Why? Because I don't know why they want to use big words, what have you.
You got to have something to show for the degree, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I just think I want our patients, when they walk out, I want them to come home to their, you know, father, their mother, their spouse, and say, well, what's wrong with you? Well, this is what he said's wrong with me. And then go, oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, what do you tell your options are? Oh, fix it or maintain it. Oh, well, that's pretty simple. Which one are you going to do? I think I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that.
Right.
Okay. When you build a house, the most important part is a foundation, right?
Absolutely.
Because if your foundation's off, well, then everything's off. And what happens over time?
Goes bad.
Yeah, and things start to degenerate faster.
Yeah.
One part fails, then it moves on to that part, which kind of starts this whole domino effect of things failing. That's how spinal degeneration typically happens. As I said, I'm trying my best to use words on a three-dimensional thing.
Yeah, no, I get it completely. When you say spinal degeneration, is that just like I guess the blanket statement for bad things happening to the spine?
Well, it can show up lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Typically, when we're talking about spinal degeneration, we're talking about your discs. So in between your bones,
cushion, the jelly
cushions, like the bounce.
Yeah,
that's what gives you that shock. So when you jump up and down, your bones aren't hitting each other. And the thing about discs are they don't have a blood supply. So they're kind of like a set of tires. And how you treat them is how long they last. So if you're driving around doing burnouts all the time, or you're driving around with a bad alignment all the time, right? Well, you're going to wear them out faster.
The way you just said that, like everything clicked. And I was like, oh, I get it now. 100% get it.
Good.
What keeps them, I guess, if there's no blood supply, what keeps them?
They're just hydrated. That osmosis, diffusion. Now you're going back to like
too much science.
Yeah, to fix to middle school science class of how that nutrients, blood flow, and that how it gets that. But they don't repair. So you can only save what you got. So if things are off and misaligned and being squished out, which then people start to have bulges and, you know, then they've got protrusions and extrusions, though they go down, you know, each one's is a little worse of a scenario, but they get started to get flattening because they're being pushed out.
When people say they have a slip disc or anything like that, the pain that's associated, is that coming from a nerve or is that coming from the disc itself?
Can be either one or both. Typically, a slip disc itself doesn't cause much pain. When a slip disc, and a slip disc being basically meaning that you've now, so you've got your disc, and imagine, once again, I'll try to draw a picture.
Yeah.
But imagine, like, you ever remember those shoes back in the day? They were real popular, probably about 10 or 12 years ago. And they had a little round circle in them, and they had the little bounce thing on the heel to give. It was real popular.
Like a pump, the Reebok pump,
something similar to that. So imagine your disc is kind of like a fibrous like rubber, but in the center is what they call the nucleus, and the nucleus is got like a jelly rubber. It's a little different. It's got a little more fluid to it, but it's really it's not too watery. And it gives that extra cushion. It's really amazing how he designed us. When you really break out the science, there was so much behind it. So but that disc is supposed to stay in the margins of the bones. So kind of like in lanes in a highway, right? So disc is supposed to stay in lane. Well, if a piece of that disc goes into the other lane, that's what they call a bulge or herniation, right? A lot of people have them, may never even know they have them, till things shift or get a little bit worse. Then that's usually what they refer to as a slip disc in most people's instances. But when they realize that's there, it's because now it's put pressure and it's slipped and it's hitting the spinal nerve root.
So it's the nerve that causes...
Typically. Now, sometimes it can go into the canal. It can, because it's a circular thing, they can bulge lots of different ways. But typically, they bulge most posteriorly or laterally. And then
meaning forward or backward, correct?
Forward, posteriorly. Sideways. So they go posteriorly, which goes to go backwards, or they go to the sides laterally, or kind of on an angle and thing. The very anterior ones are more common. And most people, if they do have them, they're not going to feel them just because there's not really anything there to irritate.
Yeah.
Because the disc itself doesn't have as much feeling.
Yeah. Of the, let's say, 73% of the people that have back pain, what do you think is the most common?
What do you mean?
Like, what do you think is the most common element associated with back pain? Is that would you say bulge discs?
No, usually it's just a simple, one of these simple subluxations putting pressure on the nerve root. So it only takes a weight of the dime on one of your spinal nerves to affect it. And the problem is only 10% of that nerve root actually really feels pain and symptoms. The rest is communication, right? Because that's its main job.
Yeah.
The other part is just only 10%. And then counting what part of that 10% that you're hitting counts on your symptoms. And typically, most of the time, people are having symptoms here and there. They just tend to ignore them. Or they're normal.
Yeah, they become kind of akin to it.
Yeah, I mean, they just do. Like, I'll never forget, I was in practice for 3 years, this woman. I'll never forget, it was actually one of my first people I took care of here in Augusta. She was a banker when I was practicing in South Augusta. And she had headache, basically in some form or fashion for 20 years. And just really bad migraines, where the point where she had gone on vacation and something with her family, in 5 to 7 years, something like that.
Jeez. Because
she got tired of ruining their trips.
Right.
So she basically said, listen, every time I go, I'm usually end up in the thing. We don't get to do A, B, and C. And started telling them just to go without her. And, but it become her norm. And it was really cool to watch her have to live life without a headache.
Yeah.
The two stories I remember from her, it's something else, certain things just stay in your brain. I remember one day, the first time I looked at her, and she was probably under care for about 4 or 5 weeks. And I said, oh, by the way, when was your last headache? And she just stared at me, and then she started crying. And I was like, what's wrong? She's like, I can't remember. I can't tell you the last time that was.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then a couple months later, she came in and told me she came in to tell me the story that she got into a fight with her family because they forgot to ask her where they were going on vacation. Because she wanted to actually go with them. Yeah. And then she was going with them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm sure you got a lot of awesome stories like that.
As a chiropractor, we're just, I feel like I'm just a part of the story. I'm just a vessel. My job is to just remove that interference and the ability that God gave each one of us to heal from the inside out. Is just move it, get it out of the way, remove the pressure, and get out of the way, and things happen.
That's your company's motto, right? We
It
move the bone, and God does 100%. The rest. God does the healing. That's awesome. So I kind of want to talk about some scoliosis, just because that's something that I suffer from. Curvature of the spine laterally, right? Mm-hmm. That is scoliosis, and then kyphosis is posteriorly.
Correct.
Is there more to that?
Close enough.
Well, you can correct me. This is just stuff that I've learned throughout the years.
No. Scoliosis, yeah. Kyphosis typically exists. There can be kyphosis is more of the rounding on the outside, yeah.
Like the Notre Dame looking.
Yes.
Yeah. How is scoliosis really prevalent? Do you know what I'm saying? Do you see a lot of it as a chiropractor?
We do.
Yeah.
We do. Scoliosis usually develops, there's a couple of different scolioses, right? So you have one that you were genetically, something genetically when you were born one of the bones, typically it's just a hemivertebrae, which means only half the vertebrae, and it looks like a wedge, started. Your body will twist and bend. See, it comes down with something called the riding reflex. So your body will do everything it can to keep your eyes level. Well, that's why you can't hunt for food if your eyes aren't level, right? So whenever you see somebody, you might see them twisted in a certain way, in a certain thing, their spine. But if you look at their head, their eyes are level. Even if they got a major kyphosis, well, then they'll have a weird lordosis to keep what? The head up.
Yeah. Interesting.
So the body will change and adapt as best as it can. Of course, eventually at some point it will, you know. So then you have the ones with the hemivertebrae, that's genetic. And then you have got scoliosis that something happened that knocked things off and your body adapted, and then it keeps switching and changing.
Yeah, so the
does that
one
make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. The one that they're born with, does it always come out like a wedge or like?
Well, it can come with a couple of different things. The wedge one's the easiest one for us to talk about, and
because it visualize. I see what you're saying. Yeah, mine is. At what point do you recommend like scoliosis really be monitored and checked?
Well,
and do you know? Do they still do the scoliosis test in school? Because that's honest to God, that's how they found mine.
Well, usually if that test is positive, you've already got it for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it also, that comes down to who's administering that test. And I hate to say it, half the time, the people that were administering that test probably didn't know what a positive really looked like, unless you already looked like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. They were like, okay, you need to go see somebody. Yeah,
that was, it was pretty just like the standard of what you hear. All the guys line up, no shirts, bend down.
Yep.
Check it.
I really don't know if they do that much anymore in the schools. I want to say that they've stopped.
I could see.
I think a lot of it's got to do with other things that have gone on with just people taking off their shirts and
yeah. Oh yeah, I get it. I get it. So once you're
But to answer your question, when what do we do? I'm probably more aggressive than other places are.
Yeah. I
have just found that earlier I catch them, we can usually stop them in their tracks and not let them get worse. So we x-ray as young as age 3. And we don't take a lot of x-rays. We'll just take one little spot shot, because we get their entire spine basically in one shot. But that's usually when we see that a lot of this stuff starts. And if we find a little area there that we can just make sure we clear out, and get it done. But typically we start to see them start showing up around 7, which is one of the bigger growth spurts. Mm-hmm. But then we see them really start getting more aggressive around adolescence.
Yeah, that's when they found mine. I was maybe 13.
That's because it's probably right after you had a bit large growth spurt.
Yeah.
And then your body just started growing. Think about when you plant the tree. Most important part is make sure that it's straight, right? That's why people tie ropes to it. Because it starts leaning off, it's going to grow that way. Well, that's kind of how the scoliosis works, except that you got the riding reflex that takes the top of the tree and straightens things out.
Turns it the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's weird to see it grow. I mean, I'm sure there's things that I could do to make it better. Like when I first was diagnosed with it, there wasn't really much that was done. I didn't even see a chiropractor. It was just kind of like, well, come back when it's 30 degrees and we'll put you in a brace or something like that, And that...
Well, because in the orthopedics world, that's what they're taught, and that's the skills that they're being told that's in their toolbox for that. So they used to be, anywhere between 20 and 30. I think the number's actually gotten up because of the braces, going to the braces. And usually the braces didn't really work because that came to patients actually wearing it. So, so scoliosis is definitely a little bit more prevalent in females than it is males. So imagine a teenage girl being told that she's got to wear this plastic brace to school every day.
Yeah. Yeah. The studies that I read on the braces is you had to work like 20 out of 24 hours.
It's just not going to happen. And you got to hope that it's going to work. And a lot of times they did not work.
Yeah.
And then when it gets bad enough to 40 degrees and plus, they'll start talking about doing surgery.
And that for me, it's something that I had, like a conversation I had with myself early on is I think I'd rather live with it than have the surgery. To me, in my mind, I can't think about having rods in my back. Like, what happens if I fall down the stairs? Are the rods going to shatter my spine?
No, they're not going to do that. But I mean, that is definitely the last resort. We've definitely had some patients where we've seen them that had to go that way. We've had a lot of them that we've had to got to stop.
That's awesome.
Which is really exciting. You know, we had a 13-year-old girl, and I guess just talks about how you say chiropractic is becoming more and more accepted.
Yeah.
Her orthopedic was like, hey, listen, he got 2 degrees in like 3 months. Why don't you give him a little more time? It's not going to do you any harm. That if he can knock off another 8-10 degrees, I'm totally okay. Let's not do the surgery, and you could live a very good life.
Can you see, like, will you see, I guess, resuscitation? Is that the best word for it? Like, will you see degrees go back through chiropractic care?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
We will.
Yeah.
Every case is different.
I guess what are common symptoms that you see people have when they have scoliosis? Like, what brings them in?
Pain.
Just pain.
Really, it's just pain, or typically guys is pain. Girls will start noticing it once again in their teenage years, and it's usually during summer bathing suit season. Somebody will unfortunately make a comment to them about, you know, their spine sticking out, especially if they're girls. With fixing scoliosis, it all counts. It's all basically comes out. It's really physics and math and where they're located. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've seen patients that have had, you know, a 24 and a 24, but they have, the way they're spread out is the body weight's more evenly distributed. Mm-hmm. So a scoliosis is not, believe it or not, typically the shorter, concise ones that are just stay more in the lumbars are more devastating than the ones that are in, like yours is in the thoracic.
Yeah.
And it's just, once again, angles and compression and how the body weight's evenly distributed.
Yeah. I think the big thing with mine is, so there's 2 things that I notice. One is when I bend forward, the right side of my back is elevated a little bit. Now, is that from a twist, or is that?
It could be either one.
Because I've always described it.
Also, your body will adapt. Remember, that's how God designed this. Body can't fix it. It's going to adapt.
Yeah.
So it will compensate. So it'll make certain muscles grow stronger. 1, because it will just naturally do it.
Right.
And 2, because your body knows that it's got to hold that and support that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it doesn't necessarily, the pain is more achy. You know what I'm saying? It's just something that you live with. Like, you're constantly tight, twisting, stretching.
Well, that might not be just the scoliosis. That's where you also have, if you have a scoliosis, you definitely have subluxations.
Yeah.
Which means that you got pressure directly or indirectly on the nerves, which are causing those muscles also to be tight.
You're learning. This is an educational podcast. This is why I want to have a chiropractor.
Does that make sense? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
To kind of, I guess, touch back and tell everybody my experience with chiropractors, and this is something that I shared with you, is I started with, and this is no shade at the joint, but it just wasn't a great experience. It felt more like a gym membership to get your bones cracked than it did chiropractic care, at least from the perspective of what I've seen online and research. Someone who actually, like, it sounds like you do, like, you really take time to educate the patient on what's going on and give it to them Barney style and say, this is how it's happening, this is what I can do to help, or these are your options. And that's something that I think I value, and I think most people value.
Well, you know, the joint was designed basically to keep really, really healthy people just healthy.
Yeah.
And they do serve a certain part of the market. The problem is there's a lot more guessing there. And unfortunately, one of my biggest things is, I hate to say it, people lie. People forget things. People forget injuries. People forget surgeries.
Yeah.
I get probably at least one every other month. And it's usually the person says, oh, I don't really want to get x-rayed. Well, then we're not the office for you, because we x-ray everybody unless there's a contraindication or it's bad for your health. Not because you just don't want to do it. And I can tell you, usually that's the person who gives us a hard time. And then we take their picture and go, oh, did you forget that you had neck surgery? And you got 2 bolts and a plate right there?
Yeah.
And half the time you can tell them they literally completely forgot because they had it done 25 years ago. So if I did a certain type of more aggressive neck adjustment on them with any type of rotational move on it, I could hurt them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, going to certain type of offices, I think that's not how I would practice. I wouldn't want my family taken care of that way.
Yeah. I was very surprised that they didn't have an x-ray. Like, in my mind, I was saying, like, all right, I told them that I have scoliosis. You'd think that they'd want to see where it is, what's going on before they start, pressing, yanking, cracking.
Well, most of them are supposed to use more or less aggressive techniques.
Yeah.
That's
that's kind of their way, or their flavor.
And it's only supposed to be, and they're supposed to actually, any type of orthopedic test, this is their own, from what I've read and been told, and I know some people that have worked for them and read their guidelines for care, so that they do know that they are, at least by a corporate level, that they're only supposed to stay in this kind of narrow window is what we're looking for.
Right.
And that anything outside that window, we should be referring to another chiropractor who does do diagnostics and x-rays. So like in our office, we have our in-house digital x-ray. We have digital range of motion. We even have thermography, which measures the temperature difference on either side of the spine, besides going through all the other orthopedic neurological tests to determine where the problem is. And also, when we see your films, we know which way to best take care of you. In other words, we see the angles of how the rotations are. So we know better when we make the adjustment. We're making a lot better estimation of where that force should go to bring it back to where it needs to be.
Yeah. I agree completely. I think it makes more sense to go into a situation like that knowing all the details you can, especially with something as important as the spine.
Yes. As I tell people, you can get new teeth, or you can't get a new spine.
Yeah, no, it's too important.
Well, I think people forget. An analogy I've always used is, we can hold our breath for, 7 to 10 minutes if we really try and we've worked at it. The average person is probably 5 minutes before bad things happen. We can go 30 days without eating and be okay. Yeah. We can go a week without water. We can't go a second without our nervous system functioning the way it's supposed to be, because it controls everything.
Interesting. I didn't know that. One of the things that I find myself oddly fascinated with is all the gadgets associated with, I guess, like making yourself, like home care for alleviating pain. So, whether it's a Theragun.
Oh, they're all kinds of. Hey, I have a Theragun. They're great. They're great for muscle stuff. Yeah.
So
I get back from the gym, or I had too many, patient bucked up on me, and I'm not seeing my massage therapist for a couple days. Yeah, I'll hit my mini little Theragun and hit it a couple times, or.
Those things are great. Yeah, we got one.
But that's muscles.
Yeah, different. Yeah, true.
That's muscles.
What are some, I guess, gadgets in the spine world?
What do you mean?
Are there any like new health gadgets that are?
Well, I don't deal with gadgets.
No.
So I'm a structural guy. So maybe this is more what you're thinking about. So, there's different ways to practice chiropractic. There's different ways of doing things. There's different also emphasis, right? So just like in the medical world, we have doctors that focus on A, B, and C. Well, in chiropractors, we have that too. So we got upper cervical doctors that focus just on the first two bones in the neck, and that's their only criteria is to make those two lined up. And they are the two most important ones, because the brainstem doesn't stop at the base of the skull; it does extend to the first two vertebrae, and any type of rotation there could put direct pressure on the brainstem. So it's a very important thing, and we check it as being a full spine guy. We check that too, but they focus just on that, and they tend to do a little bit more low force type techniques. That would be like Atlas orthogonal. Which is, we've got quite some of the best Atlas orthogonal doctors here in Augusta. And then we've got some people that do knee chest, which is another way of doing it. We have a few toggles, but AO being the biggest ones that we have in our area that focused on that. And they're, as I said, some of the best that we've in the country. Then you have guys that do instruments only, whether it be an activator or TRT. Which are very similar devices. They're a little handheld device that gently taps the bones back into place.
I think that's what I was like when I said what gadgets. That's something that I've seen on YouTube videos.
Okay,
it's like a little gun, maybe like
and it's actually it can be very, very effective. We do use it in about 15% of our clientele that don't like the snack, crackle, pop. And then you have offices just do traditional, just manual adjustments. And we do that in our office. We do a little mix of everything. I'm very proficient in 5 to 6 different techniques, counting how you want to break them down and when you come up flat flush, you're looking at it. And it really counts on what the patient needs. Because every patient will be different. And also sometimes in care, we'll see them start with, our traditional way of doing things, and then they might go to another level because things have changed. We got changes in their spine, and now they need to, sometimes it's like putting a puzzle together, and we get one area to go. Okay, now we get that other piece back, and it's almost like unlocking the mystery of where you actually started, maybe 15 years ago.
Right.
And we'll use different techniques for that.
One of this is like one of the last things I'm going to have about manual work in and of itself. I've seen this thing called the Y strap adjustment. Looks brutal. I would never have anybody ever do it to me. I can't imagine it. Like, how do you use it?
All it is basically a manual distraction, and a high force manual distraction. And just because he's making a noise, see, the noise is not. Is kind of, I always tell patients, they always get excited or they go, hey, that didn't make a noise. Well, it doesn't always going to make a noise because the noise is not important. The noise is neutral because that's just gas building up inside the joint. And when the joint opens up a little bit, the gas comes rushing out. Similar to if you blew up a balloon and you open it up a little bit at the end and you get that squeak from the rush of air. Yeah. That's all that is. And counting on your body chemistry, some people will make more than others. It's like how some people can crack their knuckles all day long. Some people can do it once a day. Some people, no matter how they try, they're never going to get those suckers to make a sound. That's kind of how the adjustment works. And just because you made a whole bunch of stuff making noise
doesn't mean you're doing anything.
Yeah. And I can tell you that technique is not taught at any school or approved at any school.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
It is not, to me, it is not scientific. And I think somebody that the board should, in the state that's in, should tell them to stop.
You already know about who and what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. Probably the one that you, yeah.
Yeah.
We'll leave names out of it, but
I won't go there.
But yes, I would say to his face that I don't believe he's doing chiropractic, and the board there should stop him from doing it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I kind of want to switch to a different side of this coin, and that's owning your own practice. What is it like being the business owner and also chiropractor?
Well, I haven't worked a day in 17 years. I look at business or practicing. I'm getting the privilege to serve people. Mm-hmm. So to me, it's never been work. So I get up in the morning after 17 years, and in Augusta alone, I think we're over 12,000 patients that we've helped. And wow, that every day every day when me and my son get up, I take my son to school every day, and I have for the last 5 years. That's one of our things. I love it. Mm-hmm. And, every morning we say a prayer. And one of the first things we ask is God to bring us the worst of the worst, so we can reconnect them with the ability He gave each one of us to heal from the inside out. And that's the first thing we ask for every day. And then, of course, we go into a little bit more other stuff that personal and what we're doing and asking us to be a better, father, son, husband, follower of Him. But that's the first thing we ask Him is to let them find a way to our office that so we can give them a chance and give them some hope.
Yeah.
So we've always looked at it as, for me, that's where it starts. That's how it starts our morning. I tell my staff that our goal is to treat them like family. As one of my staff members put it the other day, we meet people sometimes on their worst day. And we have to remember that because they've never been in pain. Not like that. Because nerve pain is not like when you cut your finger. It can be very devastating. It can be relentless. And a lot of times, sometimes when it's really, really bad, medication and stuff that's supposed to calm it down.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Doesn't do a thing. So business wise, we really try to treat everybody by the golden rule.
Yeah.
And I think as you do, I'm involved in a group called the Dynamic Essential, and it's just a bunch of chiropractors, and we're all passionate about what we do, and it's about living. Sid Williams was a close. He started Life University. Mm-hmm. I got to know Sid on a very intimate level, just because our connections with the fraternity and through DE of sitting and getting to it's amazing when you get some people that just you can't explain why they draw you to you, but they've got a message. Mm-hmm. And his thing was, you give, love, and serve out of your own abundance without expecting anything in return. Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
And that is kind of how we try to do practice. We try to keep it as affordable as people as we can. We try to make sure we take care of our staff as good as we can. Because without them, I couldn't do what I do, and I couldn't see the amount of people that I see and help as many people as I help without the great staff that I have.
Yeah.
I think I might veered off a little bit from your question, but that's kind of where it went.
All good. It was all good there.
So what do you mean by business?
Like what is it like owning? Is there do most chiropractors own their own business, I guess?
I think it's 50-50.
Yeah.
I mean, I think when you're talking about, I think that's going to be in general. It's going to be when you talk about entrepreneurs, when you own your own business, yeah, you have the great potential. Of course, I think you're going to be a lot more successful, and chances are you're going to make a lot more money. Mm-hmm. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have more freedom. Because at the end of the day, when you work for somebody, and I've done that back in the day. Well, there was that freedom when the day was over. The day was over.
Right.
The only thing I had to worry about was showing up the next morning and being a rock star. I didn't have to worry about this bill, that bill, or that person banging sick, or how are we going to do that, or now somebody went on vacation, forgot to tell us, and and then, we got to do advertising because we need people to know that we're here, because we can't just put our sign on and people just show up.
Yeah.
I mean, God will take care of some of that, but I mean, most people, one of my favorite quotes is from Thomas Edison that says, most people miss success because they're dressed up like work.
True to that. True to that, yeah. It takes work.
It does take work. It takes work. It takes dedication, and it's also something you've got to be passionate about. Like, I've told many chiropractors, some kids that are in school, and I'm like, dude, I just don't think you have it. Like, not because you don't have it, because I think you'll pass school and I think you'll graduate, but this has got to be something that you love. Because if you don't love it, you're going to get burnt down in a couple years, and
yeah,
I think that's everything. Like, my wife always asked, I have a 13-year-old son, and she said, he'll be 13, and she said, do you want him to be a chiropractor? I said, I'd love him to be. I'd love him to follow my footsteps. But as long as he finds and he's passionate about whatever he decides to do, and he's in love with that, and that every day isn't going to work, that he feels like he's serving, and that he is, whatever it is, that he's making the world a better place and not just getting a paycheck, I'll be a very happy man.
Yeah, that is... Those words, I think I resonate a lot with, and we talked a little bit before the podcast of, what I want to do with this podcast and where I want to take it, and it's something that I wholeheartedly believe in. I don't want to take it too far off track, but I think school now, primary school, does a good job in preparing you for college, but not necessarily for life and figuring out who you are.
Well, I think that's in any career.
Yeah?
Yeah. I think school is designed to pass tests. So, like a perfect example, my old office manager was with me for almost 10 years. She left us to go back to nursing school. She actually came in to get adjusted today, and she's about to graduate. And I said, hey, trying to be like, you figure out where you want to fall in love. I said, because I basically had the same conversation. I said, hey, you have this opportunity, especially now, because they're so short of nurses. I said, you are not going to have this opportunity again, where you can pretty much choose where you want to go, and they're going to probably hire you and train you. And so go where you're going to be passionate about and just rock it.
Yeah.
You know, first thing she said, yeah, she goes, they don't really teach us much in school. We know how to pass the test. We know how to do this, but they don't know us how to run every single day.
Right.
I mean, in chiropractic school, they didn't teach us how to run a business. They didn't teach us how to, they taught us how to
pass the test,
and how to take care of a patient to a certain point. Mm-hmm. And the rest you had to, hone. Because the adjustment didn't just from taking a couple classes. No, that was hours and hours and hours of practicing with buddies and screwing each other's up, and then going to see a real doctor later on that week to fix us from beating up on each other, or the things that we would come up with and to get better at. Just like the telephone book. I mean, we would make up contraptions with pillows and eggs, and could you spin an egg and not make it crack, and to get your technique right.
Yeah. I guess this is kind of one of the last questions pertaining to business. What would you say to those considering chiropractic care as a healthcare career?
I think it's the greatest thing that you can do, but I don't think it's for everybody. Mm-hmm. I think it's something you have to have the heart for. A buddy of mine, Haig, put something, and I know I'm gonna screw it up.
No worries.
But he said something the other day. It was a note he had found from another seminar, and we actually went to school together. It was one of my crew that I went to school with, and that was one of the things. The kids that I got to go to school with, we were all kids back then, and the amount of impact we've made in the, I think, together in the world, it's been pretty amazing. Yeah. That 2 years, that year of chiropractors came out of that school that year, just how much impact they've had. But he was talking about if every person is an extension of God, then he said, every time I'm laying hands on somebody and to adjust them, I'm at their altar.
Powerful.
It was very powerful. He put that out the other day on something he had wrote at a thing, and I was like, yeah, that's it. Because that's awesome. You got to be in. Yeah, don't make me wrong. There are guys that don't have that kind of passion, and they'll run very successful practices to a point. But I've never seen chiropractic as a business.
Yeah.
My goal is always serve. We've never turned away a patient. We've always found a way for it to make it work economically if we had to. Our goal is just to help as many people as we can live a better life. And at the end of the day, he'll take care of everything else.
Yeah.
And for the last 17 years, he has. So
that's beautiful. Last question I have.
Sure.
We're coming up on an hour. If you could change one thing about chiropractic care, what would it be?
Honestly, chiropractors talk about what chiropractic is. And the correction and detection of subluxations. Of reconnecting people with the innate intelligence they got inside them, which means that ability that they get to heal themselves. And I wish every chiropractor took the time to educate their patient on what was going on in a way that they can honestly digest it. Mm-hmm. I think just in general, we've gotten so busy with things, if people understand I think this is in general in healthcare, we've gotten a little too fast on certain things.
Yeah.
And even as busy as we are, if you design things the right way with the right procedures, you can educate people the right way and do things the right way and still make a lot of money and still be successful and have a great family life. That'd be the one thing. Because I think sometimes what it's labeled as chiropractic isn't. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Like a lot of people do functional medicine, and they'll do it under the quote as their chiropractic office. And don't get me wrong, functional medicine is an awesome thing. Just don't call it chiropractic.
Yeah.
Call yourself that you're the
functional
medicine doctor.
Yeah.
Don't call yourself the chiropractor and you haven't adjusted anybody.
I understand
because chiropractic without the adjustment is then you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
Because that's our entire job. And how I practice, I have a very I'm really good in I have a couple lanes that I stay in. And I know that I'm really, really good in those lanes. And I know, I may know a lot about in this other lane here and this other lane here, but I also know that that's not where I'm not my best. But I know somebody in that lane that I'll very easily say, hey, you want to know about that stuff? You can go over there. You want to know about that? Over there. This is what we do. And we have people come on all the time that go, oh, I saw that thing on the internet, or you want to do that? Yeah, that's not my thing. But you know what? That's not my thing. But you know what? Joe down the street, he's pretty awesome at that thing. That thing you're looking for, you can go see Joe and he'll do exactly that. And I think you'll probably be really happy. This is what I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think people appreciate honesty. Honesty goes a long way, especially with reputation. So, all right. Well, I really want to thank you for your time. That was awesome.
I hope I made it. I hope I made it some educational and some entertaining.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I will. I
hope I didn't go too many tangent.
No, I'll work with you. I'll create a little video or something like that, and we could show people like the spine and what it's supposed to look like. I'll put it up on my Instagram. Why don't you take however long you want and plug your business or whatever it is that you want to talk about?
I mean, we own Walker Chiropractic. We're at 104 Woodland Road, Augusta, Georgia, which is right behind the Savvy Shopper, which most people know Applebee's is across the street if you're looking for the key thing on another thing on Washington Road. We've been there in that location, I said, for 13 years. The youngest patient we've ever adjusted is 3 hours. Oldest we've ever adjusted is 99. We have not got somebody that's a century yet. The smallest we've ever adjusted is a pound and a half. The biggest, I guess you want to say that, we can take them all different sizes, was about 600 pounds.
Oh.
You know, we take care of people from the cradle to the grave. We have, and I mean this all honestly, the Augusta area and the CSRA is blessed more than most towns with some great chiropractors. Majority of them I will call a good friend. Mm-hmm. We all tend to do something a little different. You know, our goals are the same, majority of us, to correct that subluxation. There's just different ways of taking it and getting rid of it. It's like going down, if we're going to go downtown, you know, we can take Washington Road all the way down, or we can jump on Riverwatch. Our goal is the same. We're just going to take a different way of getting there. Mm-hmm. Our way is we either do, basically, we do traditional chiropractic care, which is kind of patch and fix, make you feel better, and hopefully at least get you on a maintenance program where we're going to try to pause that degeneration. But we also do corrective care, which means we try to basically undo some of that damage so it doesn't keep degenerating at the speed that it is. In other words, some of those curves we were talking about earlier, mm-hmm. we can put those curves back in to a certain point. You know, I can't make somebody who's got a 20-degree negative curved neck into a 43-degree perfect curve. But if I can get that anterior head carriage, it's 3 inches down to 1.5 inches, and I can get you 4 degrees the positive way, it's going to be a whole lot less degeneration 20 years from now. Mm-hmm. And we also, that's the kind of stuff that we do. We do that with different types of tractions and retraining. It's kind of, I call it like going into the gym for your spine. It's really reshaping. Once we get things fundamentally straightened out as best we can, lined up, get the pressure off that nerve, then we structurally, globally get rid of the global subluxation, which is putting those curves back as best we can. And that's how we're a little bit different than other people.
Awesome. All right. So, well, y'all heard the man. Check out Walker Chiropractic.
And our website is AugustaChiro.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Link will be in the description.
I appreciate it, Mike.